Welcome, welcome, folks. It is Monday, August the 11th, 2025. This is Hurricane Hub Live, streaming on 13 News Now Plus. Special shout out to our viewers on YouTube. If you enjoy this type of long-form tropical hurricane model discussion, I hope you consider giving us a subscription or just hitting that like button and ask any questions you'd like in the chat box below. We'd be happy to answer them as we go forward in time. We do this every night at 8 p.m., streaming here on 13 News Now Plus, and of course also on YouTube. We've got a lot to talk about tonight, so let's get into it. Tonight on HHL, we've got, of course, Erin, developed at the 11 o'clock advisory from the National Hurricane Center today. It's the E-named storm, our fifth, and it's it's going to be probably the strongest one so far this season as we go farther out in time within the next week or so. I'm going to show you the latest track on that in just a second. But the big question, is it going to be a threat to the United States? Now, I'll tell you what, we're going to go into a deep dive on exactly what track this may take and different variables involved. But right now, it's just too early to tell whether it will be a threat or if it slides harmlessly off into the North Atlantic and recurves out to sea, which I'll tell you what, in its current location is more favored in the long run. We'll walk through all of it, though. And we've got plenty more waves coming in behind Erin, coming off the coast of Africa to seed the Atlantic over the coming weeks as we get closer and closer to the peak of the season, which is, as of today, about a month out. Now, Erin, we revisit that name every 6 years. You know, we rotate the list for hurricane names in the Atlantic Basin. So we go back and look at past instances of Erin, and we've got 6 of them here. Now, only twice did previous tropical storm or hurricane Erins make landfall in the U.S. 1995, which was a hurricane, made 2 landfalls in Florida, and then 2007, it was a tropical storm that made landfall in southeast Texas. The other 4 instances stayed way out in the open Atlantic and recurved out to sea. Now, this one here, which is the 2001 occurrence of Erin, I'll always remember this one because if you remember the famous satellite imagery, this was on 9/11, 2001, the terrorist attack, obviously, in New York City. You saw the satellite imagery of the smoke, and then offshore, several hundred miles, was Category 3 major hurricane Erin, sitting there just beautiful on the satellite imagery. That's what also led to really nice weather along the eastern seaboard, blue skies that day on September 11th. But that was an Erin back in 2001, and there's the rest of them here plotted out on the map. Our 2025 occurrence of Erin is right here, about 3,000 miles from the east coast of the United States. So it is way, way, way out there. Lots and lots of time to watch this as it evolves over the next 7 to 10 days. But here's how it looks right now. Now, it moved through the Cabo Verde Islands, and you're looking at its location right now, and you say, well, it's in the middle of nowhere, not impacting anybody. In fact, it did take about a half dozen lives from the flooding it caused as it moved on through there within the last 36 hours. So it's already been a deadly storm, even though it just came off the coast of Africa a couple days ago. Right now, it is not near any land, which is good news for now, and it's right now a weak system, 45-mile-per-hour winds. Now, what we're looking at here is the infrared satellite imagery, and this gives us the cloud top temperatures. Why that's important, especially with tropical systems, the colder the cloud tops, the more intense the thunderstorm activity is as they're extending higher up into the atmosphere where it's colder. So we're starting to see shades of white and black there. Those are colder cloud tops. And we're watching here in real time a convective burst. And these typically happen as we go through the diurnal cycle and we go through the overnight. We see a nighttime flare-up of convection here, and that's almost like a subtle burst of intensification, which is interesting because where it's currently located is not a very conducive environment at all. Sea surface temperatures are in the upper 70s, below the threshold of 80 degrees to really sustain tropical development. It's also being influenced by some wind shear. Right now, it doesn't really look like it, but there are some winds coming in out of the south and east that's kind of throwing the main convection off to the northwest of its center. And also, it's butted right up against some stable air. And we could see this a little bit better here on visible satellite imagery. Here's Erin. Overall, a pretty impressive-looking tropical storm for being in an inconducive environment. To the north and west, very stable atmosphere here, and you can see it a little bit better on water vapor imagery. Dry, stable air, some of this, some Saharan dust. The yellow shades, the rust color here is dry mid-levels of the atmosphere, low relative humidity, Of course, a tropical system, you need a moist environment all around it, and pretty much it is, pretty well insulated from that dry, stable air to the north and west. But it's not outside the realm of possibility that some of that dry air gets pulled into the circulation, especially as it drifts towards the west and encounters more and more of it over its life cycle. So that could be an inhibiting factor for its intensification over the short term. However, the brand new track here from the National Hurricane Center, this is the 5 o'clock track. So we're going to get track updates at 11 o'clock next, and then 4 times a day from the Hurricane Center. In between that, we'll get intermediate. I'll go through those with you in just a second, but 8 updates altogether a day from the National Hurricane Center. Right now, 45-mile-per-hour winds moving at a pretty good clip to the west at 21. And Hurricane Center here takes it on a pretty much a due west, even at times southwest track here, pretty much through the end of the work week. Once it gets pretty much just northeast of the Lesser Antilles, we're going to see it become a Category 1 hurricane, which would make it the first of the 2025 season. And then quickly thereafter, maybe within 24 to 36 hours, and it's possible, too, if overall the environment remains very, very conducive and it's moving in a really, really warm ocean waters, could we see this undergo rapid intensification? It's possible. Wouldn't be the first time a storm in this general area has done so, but it's going to make a pretty big run from Cat 1 to a Cat 3 in a short amount of time. And here we are by Saturday, 2 p.m., the end of the 5-day cone from the Hurricane Center. We're at 115-mile-per-hour Category 3 major hurricane, which also would be the first of the season there. But notice the cone keeps it to the north and east of the Lesser Antilles, and generally taking it towards a west-northwest turn here. And I will show you the models here in the long run do tend to favor a recurvature out to sea, and that's going to be due to many different reasons. So here it is. We've got the cone, and then I put on the farther end here the spaghetti plots. Now, there's a lot of them here, and what I have on the map are the GFS and European ensembles. So what that is there's dozens of each model that's run dozens of times, and they tweak the initial variables to get a slightly different outcome here. And you can see the spread is from the Bahamas, from Nassau, all the way up. There's Bermuda right here. So well to the east of Bermuda, taking it safely out, even away from Bermuda. Large spread here, about 1,600 miles. So all possibilities are pretty much on the table here, but you see the majority of them keep it safely offshore of the east coast of the U.S. Still may be a threat for Bermuda, but for the U.S., it looks like a low threat right now. Okay, a lot of time to watch this. I mentioned the sea surface temperatures of where Erin currently is. What I have shown on here is anything shaded in red are sea surface temperatures of at least 80 degrees. And you can see it's nowhere near that. It's in 77, 78 degree water, which those 2 degrees makes a big difference. Once you get north of 80, you have that latent heat transfer between the surface of the ocean and the atmospheric conditions that favor intensification. So you don't have that now. And you won't have it for another couple of days before it moves in to this very conducive environment here, at least sea surface temperature-wise. We get into the 80s. In fact, by this point out here, as it's becoming a major hurricane, we're looking at 85, 86 degree water temperatures there. So that's like jet fuel for these storms to use to intensify. And then if it tracks even farther to the north and west, we're talking 87, 88 degree water temperatures here. So even more conducive for an intensification if it does get in that general direction. It doesn't curve due north by that point in time. So what's going to be driving this? The steering mechanisms here, pretty simple and straightforward for a Cabo Verde system or a Cape Verde hurricane that we see come out of the main development region. It is mainly driven by the Bermuda high, or in this case, an Azores high that's pretty much well positioned to the east. That's going to be driving these systems pretty much due west for as long as the time that it can control that due west projection here, because this is a rather weak Azores high in this example here. So the storm will move due west before it senses the weakness in that ridge and starts to move to the north. Now, if this Bermuda high is a little bit stronger and a little bit more positioned to the west, we'd see a longer track westwards until, again, the weakness is felt and the storm starts to curve out to sea, which may possibly be what we see happen with Erin. Now, if the high is stronger than forecast, and we've got an extremely strong Bermuda high, that would push this sucker all the way to the west and possibly get into the Gulf. Probably not a possibility with Erin. We're probably going to be in between that and a system that recurves out to sea, but it's all going to be dependent on the strength of the Bermuda high here. And models continue to sense a trough coming in from the north and west that'll weaken and break down that ridge, allowing almost that escape hatch to pull the storm farther to the north. So we'll see if that plays out. A lot of variables have to line up just right for that to happen. All right, let's compare the models now. We'll look at the GFS operational and the European operational. I think they've just pulled in the 18Z, so the evening model runs should be in here. But what you're going to see here are going to be isobars tightly clustered. Red is going to be European. GFS is going to be the American. And I have it tuned that it's not going to show up until we actually get a bona fide tropical storm here. And that doesn't happen until it's well to the north and west, or excuse me, the northeast of the Lesser Antilles. So here we are, it's Saturday. Both the GFS and European are pretty good on location here. Agreement this far out, 5 days out. That's a good sign that we got the agreement there right now. But watch what happens as we go a little bit farther. Look at how fast they intensify, both models, and not too far off on timing. We've got the European that's a little bit faster, but intensity and location, they are not all that far off for being 10 days out from now. And again, 10 days out, a lot can change. Here's Bermuda. Both the European and GFS take it west of Bermuda on the operational, on one run. In fact, the GFS that just came in, this is the 18Z, is noticeably farther to the west than the 12Z that came out earlier today. European, I think this is still running off the 12Z, but not all that far off. So both still safely off the coast of the U.S., but this would definitely bring indirect impacts, coastal erosion, very heavy surf, rip current risk up and down the eastern seaboard, but at least would keep the system offshore and then recurving it out to sea. All right, so I want to show you the comparison now with the spaghetti plot. So what you're going to see here in red is going to be the, well, it looks like it's not going to show up there, but what we do have on here is going to be the European model. I don't think it's going to show up. Unfortunately, I was comparing the 0Z and the 12Z model runs here that did show a little bit of a jog off to the southwest there. But regardless of that, we'll check in on that tomorrow. Also, what I did here, sometimes it's interesting to see what past storms have done in a similar location. So what I did here is query every single storm that's been at the current location of Erin or within 50 miles to get some analogs. Okay, and you can see here every single one that's in our database that's been near that location or within 50 miles, notice that none of them made any impacts to land. Now, take this as you will. It is not gospel. And whenever I show something like this, I think back immediately to 2018 with Florence. Florence was way up right about here, very far to the north, and at that location in time, every single analog kept it out to sea and moving to the north. And we all know what happened with Florence. If you don't, well, it moved pretty much due west and slammed into eastern North Carolina and slowed down and caused tremendous amounts of catastrophic flooding in eastern North Carolina in 2018. I believe it also maxed out as a major hurricane, too. But it went against all climatology, all past storms. So just because it hasn't happened before doesn't mean it can't happen. So that's why I'm saying you see the National Hurricane Center track, it's pretty much dislocated from everything that's been previous on here. So just thought it was something interesting to share there based on its current location. It's already kind of ejected off of Africa a little bit farther to the north than was anticipated before it rolled off as a tropical wave. But regardless of what happens over the next 7 to 10 days or so, we've got that time to watch it. You can see the generalized location of where it is. Takes about 10 to 12 days to reach the U.S. if it was to be a U.S. East Coast threat here. So a lot of time, probably around 10, 11 days we've got to watch it. That's not the only thing we're watching, although that's the only thing we're watching with any intent, because everything else out there is not likely to develop. We've got a wave here that's in the far eastern portions of the Gulf. That's got tagged as a 0% chance. We've got what's left of Invest 96L. Remember that? That was going to become Erin. Never did. Won't. Well, obviously, because Erin already formed, but it's got a 0% chance now. And then we've got this non-tropical low that's moving out well off to the north and east away from land, and that's only at 10% as well. So we're not really watching anything else at the moment that's out ahead of Erin. What's coming behind Erin off the coast of Africa will be something to watch, of course, as we get more and more favorable conditions getting later into the season. I talked about the advisory schedule, okay? So this is what you got to look out for going forward for updates on Erin. So we just brought you all the 8 p.m. intermediate advisory updates. We didn't get any track changes. That came at 5 o'clock, and we'll get an update to that at 11. So that's if they want to make any changes to the forecast cone or intensity guidance. That's when you'll get that at the full advisories 4 times a day, 5 a.m., 11 a.m., 5 p.m., 11 p.m., and then 2 a.m., 8 a.m., 2 p.m., 8 p.m. is the intermediate advisory. So you're getting updates every 3 hours from the National Hurricane Center on this storm. So overall, to wrap things up on the Atlantic, and then we'll jump over to the Central Pacific and Eastern Pacific, the bottom line here is that model guidance will shift, flip-flop over the coming days. You'll see on social media, you'll see on X that folks are posting one model over the other, showing the discrepancies from model run to model run. You need to develop several models in a row to gain a trend. That may be something that's going to be a little bit more confidence building than something that's just run-to-run variations. Okay, so expect model guidance to flip-flop over the coming days and change course. It's not until we get within the next 3 or 4 days we start to get a better feel as we're getting farther and farther out. Now, at the current position, as I mentioned when we started this video, an out-to-sea scenario is most favored at this point. Not guaranteed, but most favored. Now, when it makes that turn to the north will be key in writing off a U.S. threat. Now, what do I mean by that? Now, a stronger storm, a stronger Erin, like NHC's forecast to be a major Category 3, stronger storm will be able to sense the weakness in the trough a little bit more easily and get tugged farther to the north sooner. So a stronger Erin sooner, quicker turn to the north. Now, say it's having trouble getting its act together. It's encountering some dry air, or it's just not developing properly like was forecast to be. If it's weaker for longer, that means it's going to track farther to the west, and maybe if it strengthens a little bit later down the road, it'll turn north later, bringing it closer to the east coast. So you see what I'm saying there? It's really going to be dependent on its intensity as we get out to the weekend, when it starts to take that turn to the north. So all variables, we're going to have to really watch carefully. All right, out in the Eastern Pacific, where we've got no storms impacting anybody, we still have Henriette. Interesting where it is. There's Hawaii. There's Henriette. Category 1 hurricane, that far to the north, unusual. But it's not going to stay that way forever. It's going to build to the north later this week and weaken as it encounters some colder ocean waters. And then we've got a remnant low farther to the east there. Not going to be a problem. All right, we'll wrap things up tonight with our tropical trivia. Only once on record have 2 hurricanes made landfall on Bermuda in the same year. What year was that? Was it last year? Was it in 2020? Was it in 2014? Or was it in 1999? As always, I'll have the answer for you tomorrow night at 8 p.m. here on HHL. In the meantime, we'd love for you to scan the QR code to download the 13 News Now Hurricane Guide. It's got information on supplies you should have on hand, emergency numbers you might need, and, of course, a whole lot more fun stuff. All right, and make sure to join us right here every weeknight, Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. for the latest on the tropics. We'll see you back here tomorrow.